Alright guys, my name is MetaGoblin, and today we're going to be looking at some secretly valuable items that you should definitely not vendor while leveling up in TBC Classic. I guarantee you that these items will have an increased value if you sell them on the auction house, sometimes not immediately, and the value will actually increase later on in the expansion, which nonetheless means that you should hold on to them for actually quite a long time. The economy will probably be quite interesting on continued servers because people will be quite rich and paying big prices for these items. I can only tell you what they're roughly worth on private servers, so by a large part the value that I'm telling you will be massively increased. Just before I jump in guys, want to help out, please subscribe to my channel, follow me on Twitch and Instagram, but anyway, let's jump into the video. So the first item on this list is scrolls. So some scrolls provide very unique buffs that can't be provided by any class in the game, and then sometimes the scroll is just simply useful because you haven't brought that class to the raid. I think the min-maxing speed running culture will probably inflate the prices of these scrolls because they do actually provide a big fat stat bonus comparable to a food buff. For instance, a scroll of strength can increase your strength by 20 points, which is a cheeky little buff. If you're on a realm that has a lot of really hardcore guilds that care a lot about speedrunning, I can definitely see these scrolls being quite expensive, especially as a stack of 5 will go for 20 gold on a current private server that I play on. The main ones that are going to be expensive are strength, agility, spirit and protection, because those buffs do not stack or get overwritten by other class buffs, by a large part anyway. If you look at a scroll for stamina for instance, they'll go for like barely any silver, because obviously a priest can provide that buff. This will probably give you a half decent amount of gold, because by the time you've leveled up to level 70 you're easily going to have about 20 random scrolls in your bag, so resist the urge to use them, get them sold on the auction house. Number 2, we have fat greens with a capital PH. Sometimes greens have a random proc chance to have insane spell power, healing power, defense rating or resist stat on them, or insane stamina stat. Spell power items like plus 50 fire spell power on your cloak can be a huge DPS increase, especially on the wand, since wands normally only have the spell power stat on them anyway, so you're not sacrificing any of the main stats like intellect or stamina, plus the drops from dungeons don't give that much spell power. So a green spell power wand can be pre-raid best in slot, and have sold himself for easily 100 gold, even at the State of Karazhan server, which is like not in a pre-raid state. In a pre-raid state I probably would have sold for double that, and then probably double that again. That's probably what they're going to sell for on classic TBC. Especially when you bear in mind that a plus 21 spell power wand is likely going to be best in slot until Black Temple, unless you get lucky with a drop from raid trash. Plate nature resist gear will be very useful for Hydros in SSC. To boss it requires quite a lot of nature resistance for the tanks, so you may want to hold on to some big nature resistance green gear. Normally it has nature resistance and stamina on it, and they're definitely going to bump up in price when that raid is released. Same goes for fire cloth resist gear and shadow resist cloth gear. Okay, the fire resistance cloth gear is needed for Warlock's tanks to tank Leo the Blind, and shadow resist gear is actually needed for Black Temple, so hold on to all of those gear pieces until that particular raid is released. You may also want to keep hold of high stamina cloth gear for mage tanking. Basically, mages are required to tank a particular boss on the first boss of Gruul's Lair, so they need about 1200 HP, which can be quite difficult to get in normal cloth gear, which means they need to stack particular increased stamina and resistance gear like we just talked about for that boss. High defense rating gear can also be very useful for getting undergeared tanks to their defense cap, so it can sell for a decent amount, particularly when it's a ranged weapon with a lot of defense rating, or a cloak or a ring or something like that, where the tank doesn't have to sacrifice a big stamina piece. So overall, hold on to those interesting green items. To be honest, most level 67 plus green items will likely sell for a lot on the auction house because they just provide really good, useful stats. Anyway, let's move on to our third item, which is Strange Spores. Okay, this is a white item that drops from many mobs in Zangamash. Okay, the reason why these are so useful and unique is because they are needed for a cooking recipe, the Sporling Snack, which is tailored for hunters and affliction warlocks, and obviously demonology warlocks. It increases the pet's stamina and spirit by 20 points. And I imagine because it increases both you and your pet's stamina by 20 points, the stamina that it gives you will also be transferred to the pet, so it's technically increasing your pet by 40 stamina points. Although I need someone in the comment section to confirm that, and I will pin it, because I'm not 100% sure whether that is a private server bug or it is something that happened in retail TBC. The reason why this item is so useful is because it's very important for you to keep your pets alive, because they're at massive risk of dying to certain raid mechanics. That's in a stack of 20, easily go for 40 gold on Karazhan, which can easily be doubled when TBC Classic is released. While on the topic of cooking reagents, most of the meat that drops from beasts that is white quality will be used in particular cooking recipes that will sell for a decent amount of gold, or you can just keep it for yourself for raiding. So items like the chunk of basilisk can sell for a gold each because they're used for the blackened basilisk recipe, which is a very useful spell power food buff for basically any caster, and even protection paladins. Some other good ones are the Talbug venison, which gives you a hit chance food buff. You've also got warp flesh for an agility buff, and then the serpent's flesh that is also used for another recipe. And all of these will sell for a decent amount of gold on the auction house, totally raw, or you can cook them to increase their value slightly. Number 5, you will be lucky to get one of these items. We're going to be talking about recipes, formulas, patterns, plans and schematics. So there's a number of rare recipes that drop in the open world, which are very essential for enchanting or alchemy crafts, which are best in slot for raiding. And the issue is when TBC servers launch, is these items don't normally appear because they have a really low drop chance in the open world or in dungeons. And when a server launches, there will be an absolute desperate demand for these items because there will be so little of them on the server, which means their price on a server launch will be extremely high. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these recipes went for over 500 gold. The really big ones drop from mainly dungeons, so keep an eye out when you're doing your dungeons, and then need all recipes that you find, unless there is someone in the group who genuinely has that profession. So just don't vendor any single recipe that you find, because you never know how much it's going to cost on the auction house. And my bet, if you're playing during a server launch, it's going to be quite a lot of gold. Lastly, we have rep items, which can be very irritating because they are, have a such high chance to drop, but you need to be resisting the urge to vendor these items because they will sell for a decent amount on the auction house. It's very important for everyone when the server launches to grind up Aldor and Scryer rep for particular gear, but mainly because of shoulder enchants, which are better than the Zul'Gurub shoulder enchants. The items can be arcane tomes, Sunfury signets and Firewing signets for the Scryers. Then you have Fell armaments, Mark of Sargeras and Mark of Kil'jaeden for the Aldor. They should be selling any rep items that you don't want. You can also trade the items with members of your guild, in order to get your rep. Anyway guys, that's where I'm going to end the video there. My name is MetaGoblin. Until the next video, ciao.